So what I want to show you is how we're going to have the customer microservice perform a REST API call to order to fetch some order information. So here, if I open up VS Code, so in here, let me just open up the customer and then server.js, and in here, have a look. So we have API v1 and then customer, and this basically gives us the list of all the customers. And here we have API v1 customer and then the customer ID /order. Now this makes, so let me just collapse this for a second. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Let's just collapse this for a second. So this makes a network call to the order service, API v1 order customer, passing the customer ID. So this is some JavaScript and Node. I'm not expecting you to know about all of this, but I'm just showing you the implementation details. And if you want to learn more about Node and Express and JavaScript, I've got courses teaching you all of this. So in here, what I'm going to do is, so basically you can see that we have the order service in here, right? So the order service, so if I open up the order folder, server.js, here we have the endpoint, right, that the customer microservice does invoke. And in here we have the orders. So this is just a static list, customer ID, and then some items, right? And if I go back to customer and then server at the very top, we have 3 customers. So here the order service is passed by an environment variable. So what I want to show you first is how to do this the wrong way. So let's go back to our terminal and just keep in mind of this environment variable. So let's just go back to our terminal, and in here, so one of these pods has to make a call to this one here, right? So either one of these. So let's just grab one IP address. So here I'm going to press Ctrl C. Let's just grab any of those pods, cube, CTL, and then describe, and then pod. There we go. And all I want from this is the IP address. So this guy right here. So now that I have the IP address in here, what I'm going to do is, let's just go back to VS Code for a second. So I just want you to see, so order service, and this is HTTP and then the order service, right? So this is the IP address for our pod that we have, right? So here, what I'm going to do is, let me just collapse this for a second and this as well, and open up customer deployment in here. And you see inside of the containers, we're going to have a new property, and this will be env, and this is a list of environment variables. So here I'm going to say name, and this will be order underscore service, and you'll learn more about environment variables later. And then in here, let's just say value, and then the value will be the IP address. So this in quotes, and there we go. So this is our order service. Now save this. Let's go back to the terminal, and we're going to say cube CTL apply -f and then customer deployment. There we go, configured. So now what we're going to do is the following. We're going to first, still in testing mode, let's say cube CTL get pods, just to make sure everything is fine. There we go. So you can see that these two are terminating and we have new ones up and running. So let's expose this deployment. So port forward, and then deployment, and then customer, and then 8080 right here. So 8080 on the host, maps to 8080 on the container. Now let's just press enter, and let me open up my web browser. And in here, check this out. So localhost 8080 API v1 customer. If I refresh this, you can see that this works. Now, if I go back to VS Code for a second, and in here, so basically you can see that we have, so this is the one that we've just hit, right? So we have the array of objects, but we have ID and then orders. So basically we can pass any of these IDs, so 1, 2, or 3. And on the order microservice, in here we have customer ID 1 and 2. So 3, which is, I think it's Bilal. Bilal doesn't have any order. So let me just go back to my web browser, and in here say / and then let's say 1 / and then orders. Enter. And it seems that we have an error, so cannot connect to, and then this is basically 10 dot, so basically the IP address and then 80. So this is meant to be 8081, which is the order microservice, right? It's running on 8081. So my bad. Let's just go back for a second, and in here let's just change the customer deployment, and here, so this will be column and then 8081. Save this, and then let's just go back to the terminal, Control C, and let's apply customer deployment, and it should come up fine. And then port forward, or let me just say get port, so you see, there we go. So order, oh actually customer running 5 seconds ago, so we have 2. Now let's just port forward the deployment customer. There we go. Now if I go back to my web browser again, and this time it should work, and there we go. So you can see that we have data coming back, right? So here we have customer ID 1, and then items, apples and bananas. So if I change this, so here, so if I say that, so this is customer 2 in here. There we go. So water, and let's just say customer 3. So customer 3 does not have any orders. There we go. Empty, right? It's empty. So you can see that now both microservices are talking to each other, right? So this is really cool. But now check this out. So if I basically press Control C for a second here, and then let me just get pods, and let's just delete order. So cube CTL, and then delete, and then pod. So we want to delete this pod. There we go. Control Z for a second, grab this one, Command C, and then let's delete this other pod, and then Control Z, and then get pods. There we go. So you can see that we have 2 new pods, right? So we have 2 new pods. Now let's again port forward. There we go. And if I go back here, so now let's actually refresh this and see if it works. So remember, I said that we should never trust the pod IP address because it changes. So if I reload, you can see that it's hanging, and basically this will never work. And eventually it should time out. And there we go. You can see that we have an error, and connect, and then timeout, and then the IP address plus the port. But you can see that this is not working because the IP address has changed, right? So this IP address in here, so this one has changed. And this is why we have to use the service Kubernetes object. And there you have it. Hopefully this makes sense. So I just want to demonstrate to you why we need services, and why we should really never use pod IP addresses, right? So this is the whole point of this section. So next, let's go ahead and learn about our very first service with Kubernetes.